Hello, Rosie here, and I'm going to share with you my process on how this layout came together for the Altenew mixed media blog, and I'm thrilled to be the guest designer for September. So let's get started creating some texture on the white cardstock background. So I do that by tapping my jet black watercolor brush marker just over my white cardstock to add some black splatters. Now I set that aside to dry, and now I'm going to mat my photos. I'm using 2 photos, and I'm matting them on gold foil cardstock. So I've added a Altenew adhesive to that, and you'll see here I had to peel my photo off. I lined it up crooked, so I had to just remove it there and replace it so I had a nice even border around it. So now I'm going to take my second photo and I'm going to mat it the same as the first, and now I'm going to set those pieces aside, and I'm going to take my embossing folder, which is the Blossoming Branches embossing folder, and I'm going to rub ink onto the embossing folder just to one side, and that's Forest Glades mixed media ink. Then I place my cardstock inside and run it through my Big Shot machine. Now I add more ink to the folder. I wanted to have a darker green color on that cardstock, and then I run it through again, and I just wiggle that sheet around just in that little top left corner there until it clicks into place, and then I know everything's lined up and I can run it through my Big Shot machine again. And so now it's time for a lot of fussy cutting. I embossed 2 separate pieces of white cardstock, so there was a lot of fussy cutting, which is why I'm not going to bore you with all of it. So once we get the fussy cutting done, I'm going to die cut with the floral lace die, and I die cut the dark green cardstock out of the Wildflower 12x12 scrapbook collection. There's a really nice darker cardstock in there that worked great with this. So now I take some of my fussy cut pieces and I'm just going to move them around my layout. I bring in the photos and I'm just going to kind of shift them around to different locations on my cardstock until I am happy with the placement. So I'm not gluing those down quite yet. I'm just kind of deciding generally where they're going to be on the layout. So before I get started adhering any of these pieces, I decided that I wanted to add a little bit more gold onto my white cardstock. So I just take the Enchanted Gold pigment ink and I'm just going to press that ink pad through the Warp Speed stencil, and it just adds a little bit of shine to that layout. So you're just going to see that kind of peeking out from underneath the floral lace die cuts, because we're going to adhere those over top of those corners. So again, I'm placing those in the top left and the bottom right corner, and I'm going to adhere them with liquid adhesive. And I'm just using an adhesive that has a fine tip there, so I can get enough glue on there so it'll stick on the layout, but it's not going to make a big mess onto my paper. So I've got those adhered now, and now I'm going to go ahead and adhere the 2 main fussy cut pieces of my 3D embossed pieces. So I'm going to do again one in that bottom right hand corner and another one in that top left hand corner. And that's the start of what I call a frame, an inward looking frame to frame the photos, because we'll be adding more fussy cut pieces as we go to build up that frame. But this is the first layer and just kind of gives me the general idea of what my layout is going to be, where the various pieces are going to go. So I just add a little bit more glue to a few pieces that are sticking up here and there. You may need to put an acrylic block or a book on top of these die cuts while the glue dries, just to make sure that it adheres well to your cardstock. We don't want this falling off our layout. So now I'm going to fussy cut some more pieces, and you'll see that I just kind of play around with tucking them in here and there till I have them in the areas that I want them. Once I'm happy with that placement, then I add glue and stick that down onto my layout. And I'm just going to carry on fussy cutting bits and pieces here and there and adding those here and there until I'm happy with where they're at. So now I can get started with adhering the photos to this layout. So the first thing I'm going to do is add instant dimension foam tape to the back of those matted photos. I'm not going to peel off the release paper quite yet. I'm just getting them ready, and again, I just place that for a visual reference for myself of where it's going to go. And I decided to tuck in a few more die cuts, or I should say fussy cut pieces, just in between those two photos that just kind of really tie everything all together from the corners through the center all the way to the other corner. So before I adhere the photos, I'm just going to trim off those overhanging pieces from the floral lace die, because that's a larger die. And now I'm going to go ahead and remove the release paper from my photos. So I've removed the release paper and I'm placing those two photos in the center there, just over top of my fussy cut pieces there. And you see I had to kind of lift that up a little bit because it was a little bit crooked. Sorry that my paper itself is a little bit crooked. I think my camera was a wee bit off, but hopefully that's okay. You kind of can get the idea of where we're going with this. So I'm liking that, so now I'm going to work on the title. So I showed you earlier in the video, I didn't mention the name, but this is the fine alphabet die, and I've die cut the letters out of gold foil paper and just lined them up on some post-it tape so I can place them all down in one go. I've added liquid adhesive as well, and I'm just going to stick those down, remove the post-it tape, and then just add glue to the bottom edges of those letters. And now it's time to embellish. So I'm adding here some antique gold sequins, and I like to place them around the layout first without any glue, kind of decide how many I want, where I would like them to be, and once I'm happy with their placement, then I can go ahead and add glue to where I want those to stick. So now I've also taken some enamel dots from the Greenfields Enamel Dots pack, and I'm just picking the black and the darker green, and I'm placing those around, and now I'm going to go ahead and glue down my sequins. Now once I was finished gluing these sequins down, I felt that okay, this is good, it's done, but I set the layout aside for a day or so and I felt like it was missing something. So what you see here is the end of the video process, but it's not the actual completed layout. You'll notice in that top left corner there's a bit of a straight edge coming out from those fussy cut 3D embossed florals. So what I did was I actually fussy cut some more florals and I added them over top of that little area with pop dots. And here's the actual completed image. So you can see where I've added those fussy cut pieces, and I also added those black strips of cardstock to number one, ground the title so it didn't look like it was floating in midair, and just to also tie in both sides of that layout as well. So I hope you've enjoyed a peek at my process on how this all came together, and I hope you've enjoyed this guest design post here for Altenew, and thanks so much Altenew for having me. Bye-bye.